Phone. Becki is she's one of our Raleigh insiders that keeps us in the know what's going on with Raleigh politics, and there's a lot going on, and Becki always knows what's going on. She's got her finger on the pulse of state government, and she's on the telephone with us this morning. Good morning, Becki.
Good morning, Henry.
It's always great to have you on. Thanks for being on. The legislature came back to Raleigh Monday night. They're already at work. I guess the first thing I want to talk to you about, everybody's concerned about the budget. The Senate budget has a lot of provisions in it that we're all very concerned about here in Eastern North Carolina. It would be very harmful, I think, to our Brody School of Medicine, Vidant Health, and of course, you know, I'm concerned about the advertising tax and those kind of things. I talked to some veterinarians who are wondering why they're being singled out. So I want to talk to you all about that. But that's going to be all hammered out in a conference committee made up of members of both the House and the Senate. And yesterday, in an unprecedented move, the Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, appointed every member of the House of Representatives that voted for the budget to the conference committee. Now, the conference committee is usually made up of 10, 15 people from each side, and you have 10, anywhere from 20 to 30 people sitting in a room working on trying to hammer it out. But there's 82 people that voted for the House budget, and the Speaker of the House appointed all of them to the conference committee yesterday. What's going on here?
Well, we were all a little bit surprised at this. This is kind of unprecedented. Yeah, there are more of the 120 House members, 82 of them have been appointed to this conference committee. Tim Moore has said he wanted to be inclusive. He wanted to have more eyes on the documents, on the negotiations as it went through. Somebody described, this isn't a conference committee, this is a pig-picking party.
Yeah, somebody suggested yesterday they were going to have to hold the conference committee meetings in Carter Finley Stadium.
Right, yeah. And, and there, now, of course, the other joke that's going around is in order to make the teams even, the Senate will appoint Tom Apodaca.
That is hilarious and accurate, I might add. But
right,
we should point out for people who don't know, there are only 50 members in the entire House, in the entire Senate. So if there are 82 members of this committee, I mean, the Senate can't even come up with enough to match up.
Yeah. The one thing that we do know about the Senate conferees is there won't be 82 of them. Now, the other thing we were talking about yesterday is Senator Berger could appoint all of the senators, and each one of them could bring an imaginary friend to the conference committee. And, again, the teams would be close to each.
What's really good? I mean, Tim Moore doesn't really expect 82 people to get in a room and work on the budget, does he? I mean, what's really happening here?
Yeah, well, what is going to happen is the same thing that happens all the time with every one of these conference committees, and particularly the ones for the budget. We will have the key decision makers that will be making those decisions. Those conversations are going to take place, offline. They'll be held in people's offices, perhaps over dinner and a drink, early morning breakfast meetings, those kind of things. So the reality of it is these decisions are going to be made by a handful of the House and Senate leadership. Speaker Moore, of course, will be at that table. Senator Berger, and then, let's not forget, too, the governor has a voice in this.
Yes.
What the conferees will be battling out are the provisions in the House proposal and the provisions in the Senate proposal. The governor's budget was proposed back in March. Now, what he did in that was he laid out the priorities that he wanted to see. He has been watching this very closely and has weighed in on a number of the provisions in both the House and the Senate budget.
Mm-hmm.
So, he also is a very big player in this. So we have the conference committee. The Senate will appoint theirs today, and we do expect it to be bigger than just Senator Apodaca. But, once that is underway, then, we will, I believe we will have some open meetings. We will have some open conversations. Some of the meetings will be, will be open to the public. We'll be reporting on it. But the reality of it is these things are going to be hammered out at the very highest level of leadership. And this is not anything unusual. This is how it's done.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned concerns that you have, and many folks do. A lot of people have concerns about things that are both in the House and the Senate budget. And I think it's important to realize at this point is you've got two documents that are very different, And what that final document is going to look like is very different than either of the two that we're starting with.
You know, the thing about it is, though, and I had someone say to me yesterday, when the Senate disagrees with you, they don't just disagree with you; they want to punish you. And so there's this mentality, and everybody's wondering, what did the veterinarians do? This idea that, the Senate wants to lower the corporate tax and that they've got to come up with new revenues. Everybody kind of gets that. Whether you agree with it or not, everybody kind of understands that. And there's, some belief that that's the way that North Carolina can create jobs and instead of creating big incentive packages and luring big companies here. I don't think it's the right way to go, simply because I just think that all it does is help the very huge companies in North Carolina. And most of us in business are LLCs or sub-S corporations that will not get any benefits from lowering the corporate tax. So I disagree with that. But the question is, in going after new revenues, why the veterinarian? Why were the veterinarians singled out? Why was advertising singled out? And most people believe that the advertising tax will not pass this session, but just talking about it worries people in the advertising sales business, including yours truly. But let's just start with the veterinarian. What do the veterinarians do to get on the list to say, okay, when we start taxing services, instead of taxing the lawyers, instead of taxing doctors, instead of taxing CPAs, we're going to start with the veterinarians. I mean, why veterinarians?
Well, this is the problem that you run into as you try to expand the sales tax base. And that's really what is behind this. It is a reform of the tax system. And as you mentioned, the corporate tax will go down. That was put into the 2013 tax reforms with revenue triggers. We have met that revenue trigger, so the corporate tax will go down another down to 3%. There is lost revenue in that. The other thing that is in this Senate tax reform proposal this year is a reduction in the personal income tax, which, Henry, to your point, a lot of small businesses file as, under that category. Mm-hmm. That would benefit them. But this is the problem that you get into when you begin to expand the sales tax base, and the better way to do it would be on consumption entirely. Take it off of your income, what you spend, tax that. It doesn't matter what you spend it on. When you start to expand the sales tax base, who are you going to pick? How are you going to do this? One of the things that you don't want to do is you don't want to create and burden, particularly small businesses, as becoming an additional tax collector for state government.
Exactly.
So one of the things that I think they're looking at is, okay, who is out there that is already collecting taxes that we can expand that tax to the service? And if you look at veterinarian, and I'm not making an argument for this, I'm just trying to, figure out the reasoning. With this, veterinarians also sell different products that are taxed. So they're already a tax collector for state government. So to expand that to those services may be part of the thinking. Now, you get into this thing, too, and this is one of the arguments that we've made at the John Locke Foundation for years, is, how do you do this and be fair? To your point, why veterinarians? Why not lawyers? Why not law firms? Why not doctors, physicians, medical practices? It kind of goes on. And so this is the problem that you get into. The better way to do it would be to go to a complete consumption tax, where you pay a tax on what you consume, and it doesn't matter where you consume that. It's a simplification of the tax system that the General Assembly really isn't looking at.
The House...
that's what the problem is.
The House is sending signals that they do not agree with the advertising tax, that they think that's a bad idea. Florida put an advertising tax in, had to repeal it in 6 months. It became such a disaster. And it's a double tax on small businesses. It creates another tax and burden on small businesses. And even I was appreciative that John Hood wrote a column recently last week and published it about how bad the advertising tax idea is. But you go back again to the advertising tax and you say, okay, let's say they don't agree to that, but they do start taxing services somewhere in this budget, and then it's going to be a free-for-all after that. It's going to start, and they're going to start taxing services over and over again every session. And look, I think even the House has agreed that there should be a tax on automobile service departments, on dealerships. You have to pay sales tax on the parts, but you don't pay sales tax on the service. So when you go get your oil changed now, you don't pay a tax. But you're going to have to start paying a tax after this budget is passed. And I think even the House is agreeing to that. Am I right? It looks like the House is on board with the auto repair tax. And so we're going to start, for the first time in history, in this state, taxing services, it looks like, after this budget is passed.
Well, that's the direction that they're going in. That's the direction that they said they were going to go in 2013, is that they would expand the sales tax base but lower the overall rate. So that's kind of the key to it. And Henry, that's one of the things that when you look at these reforms, as we did with the comprehensive tax reforms in 2013, you need to look at the whole system, the whole reform that they're proposing, because where one tax may go up, the other taxes go down. The end result would be a lower tax burden, and that's the direction that we want to go in. But as far as what's going to get through the session, the Senate has had a very aggressive additional tax reforms proposed, and there's 5 or 6 things in that proposal. The House really didn't do much of that, if any. The House and the governor's position on this is we had comprehensive tax reform in 2013. Some of those just went into effect last year. Let's let this cake bake a little bit, see where we are, see where tweaks need to be made, and then go back and adjust it after we've given it a little bit more time. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, I think one thing that is always important as we go into these budget negotiations, don't forget the revenue and the taxing part of it is only part of this. The other and equally important part of it is the spending.
Yeah.
So as you're looking at, do we need more revenue? Do we need less revenue? If we're going to get rid of one tax menu piece, do we need to make it up with something else? Let's not forget that a big part of it, where are we spending that money? Are there ways that we can further reduce spending so that there is less need for additional taxes?
And to your point, the problematic stuff in the Senate budget looks like all the extra taxes and how they're going to start taxing people in a different way. But the Senate budget was only a 2% increase in spending. The House budget was about 6.5% increase in spending, and they've got all this stuff in there that I don't think the Senate will ever agree to. Like they're trying to go back and put in more film incentives. They're putting in more solar energy incentives and things like that. I mean, this is going to take a long time to get agreement, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot to negotiate, and there's been jokes about them being there at Halloween. And I know Representative Blust even made a comment when I was over there the other day in the Finance Committee. He made a comment. He says, "Are we going to get Christmas off?" And so how long do you think this is going to take? I mean, they're going to be there through most of August, are they not?
Yeah, I think they clearly will be. Now, they did that continuing resolution that extended the state budget. The deadline that they had was June 30th. The new fiscal year began July 1st. They did a continuing resolution which got them through, I think it's August 14th. Now, they can issue additional continuing resolutions, but there is sort of this artificial deadline that they've made for themselves. But, Henry, starting next week, that only gives them 16 legislative days.
And they don't look like they're in a big hurry. This is Thursday, and we still don't have anybody appointed from the Senate to negotiate the budget.
Right.
They've been back since Monday, and this is Thursday. We thought it would happen like Monday night or Tuesday morning, and they'd already be in meetings talking about the budget. They're still not even talking about it.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you're right. I don't know how long it's going to take. And, North Carolina is very unusual in that we are only one of 11 states that does not have session limits. Most states say you have to come in, you have to get your business finished, and get out of town. Texas only meets every other year.
Yeah.
North Carolina doesn't have that. So, as you mentioned, I mean, this can go on until they're finished. And actually, in 2001, they did go until December. So, just kind of joking about Halloween and all of this, I mean, it's not out of the ordinary. But I think 2 quick points on that. It costs taxpayers $50,000 for each day that the General Assembly is in session. So the longer this goes on, the more it's costing us in tax money. And for me, I would rather see that money go to pay police officers, to pay good teachers well, or give it back to the taxpayers.
Well, here's an idea that's being floated. I mean, and I don't know what you think about this, but, with all this extra money that's being paid to keep them there, why don't we go ahead and just make this a full-time job, like Congress, like many states have done, and say, right now we're only paying these guys $13,500, something like that, plus per diems to be there. Why don't we just go ahead and make it a salary and say we're going to pay, you can go to work, you can run for Senate, and if you get elected, you'll make $50,000 a year or $60,000 a year, something like that. I mean, wouldn't it be cheaper?
Well, it would probably be cheaper. And the other thing about
it might be better government, too. It might be better government to have full-time people working on this stuff.
Right. And, when this was set up, North Carolina was not the national player that we are now. We are now the 9th largest state in the country. Our budget of $22 billion, when you factor in the federal money of over $50 billion, we are the size and the budget of many small countries around the world. So, and a lot of important issues to take care of. So does this require a full-time legislature? And that's a question that, may be asked as we go through with it.
Yeah, it's been debated for a long time. I mean, I've always thought that it probably didn't make sense. But, it is difficult for a business person to leave their business. I take a guy like Brian Brown here in Greenville, who's been a terrific addition to state government. Who's been a fearless fighter for Eastern North Carolina, thank God. And, Brian has just been unbelievable. And, here he is making $13,500 to do this, leaving his small business on a day-to-day basis, leaving his small children at home to go do this on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you look at that, and it's got to be tough for a business person to be able to do that. And so what you end up with is a bunch of, as somebody used to say, you end up with a bunch of retired school teachers up there. But it's a lot of retired, it's a bunch of rich people who can afford to do it for the most part.
or retirees.
Or retirees. Yeah. And that's not always the best mix. And for people
diversity
to represent state government, in my opinion.
Right, and you lose that diversity of experience of, I think it's great to have people like Brian Brown, and you're right, he's done a fabulous job, but people like him who own a small business, who have young children, their perspective is very different than, a 72-year-old retired school administrator brings to the table. I mean, we need all of it, but you're exactly right. The way it's set up, it is a real deterrent. Now, and people who live close enough to Raleigh that can go home at night and at least have dinner with their families.
Yeah.
That's a little bit different. But North Carolina is a big state, and so you have people who it's unrealistic to drive 2 or 3 hours back and forth every day.
Yeah,
so
if you're in business, it's going to cost you money to be in the state legislature, and I'm not sure that's the best method to do it. All right, Becki, it's always great to have you on. You always have great insight. Had several other things to talk to you about. A little controversy at the State Board of Elections. I'll make a quick comment about it. We only got like a minute, but breaking news this morning, one of the members of the Board of Elections has actually resigned this morning, and the governor yesterday said he thought he should resign. This is the guy who is a part of a law firm that represents one of the people involved in the sweepstakes industry that is under investigation for campaign fraud by the Board of Elections. This guy's been sitting on the board for 17 months trying to get information. His firm is representing this guy. I mean, that's just wrong. I mean, and yesterday he said he wasn't going to resign, and the governor said, yes, you are. And so this morning the governor won, and this guy has resigned this morning.
And, I think this is another example of what we've seen so far is, there is a question as to whether or not he actually broke any laws. But it clearly, I think at the very least, he used poor judgment.
Yeah.
And, had he sat on that board, he did not represent the sweepstakes industry, but a law partner of his or someone in the law firm.
You know what, though, Becki, the standard for being on a state board like that, and I'm on one, I can tell you, it's not, the standard shouldn't be, did I break the law? The standard should be, am I doing the right thing?
Right.
And
exactly.
acting with character and integrity. And this guy, didn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. Exactly. All right.
Yeah.
Becki Gray from the John Locke Foundation.